directed questions to each professor that just keep randomly appearing, which is fantastic. That'd be a great decision. All right. Well, so the first question is for you. To use the analogy of the jury trial, use the analogy of the jury trial, if you lean heavy on the writings of Mark and Paul, who were hearsay witnesses, and whose hearsay evidence would be disallowed by the judge in a trial, shouldn't we use the same logic as the court system and be skeptical of Mark, Paul, and other hearsay witnesses in the Bible, especially since three-day resurrection is attributed to other gods, Krishna, Horus, etc., which were written years before Jesus' time?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Let me tackle the second part of it first. The person asking the question says, doesn't the fact that there are other resurrection stories in other religions add a new interesting variable into the mix? Here I simply respond in the same kind of way that C.S. Lewis often responded to this particular point. He said that the fact that a story has been repeated in many different religious traditions doesn't necessarily invalidate the idea that it could pop up genuinely as a historical fact in some place. Lewis wanted to call the incarnation and the resurrection myth become fact, because there are many mythic stories of incarnations and resurrections in various kinds of ancient religions. But that by itself, I don't think undercuts or reframes the issue decisively, or even really probabilistically, in favor of or even against the resurrection. Now, the other part of the question, I think, may be even more interesting, which is how should you handle like the procedural rules in our American jury system? How tight of an analogy do you want to make between that and historical evidence? And I would say, I'm not saying that we need to import the sorts of things in our American judicial system to every historical claim. That would end up invalidating almost all secular history, as well as religious history. But I do believe that Paul, in addition to being a hearsay witness of the appearances of Jesus to, say, Peter and the 12 and James, was also a first-hand witness, because he said that Jesus appeared to me also. So I think Paul's in a somewhat unique position in that he's passing on an early tradition about what happened in and around Jerusalem to the earliest Christian disciples. But he's also giving some eyewitness testimony about, hey, this happened to me.
I'd love to follow that up if that would be a chance. But
Go ahead. We're going to do a minute follow-up on each question too. Does that work?
let me change the question. Let me tweak that question just a little bit. Imagine you were falsely accused of committing a murder, and you were put on trial. And then let's just focus on Mark and Paul. So you're falsely accused. You didn't do it. Thank you. You did not do the murder. You're put on trial, and we bring out two witnesses. One of them says, I was walking on the road to Damascus, and I had a seizure and fell down and had a vision. And in my vision, I saw Russell commit the murder. That's your first witness. Second witness, Mark, put him on the stand. What's your reasons for thinking Russell did the murder? Well, I heard from some people who said that they talked to some people who saw it. And they told me that Russell committed the murder, so I'm really sure that he committed the murder. That strikes me as being the analogous sort of court case. And I don't think, I'm not trying to be smart or flippant about it. I think that makes it really problematic.
Let me just say, I think that's exactly the right sort of move for Matt to make. My predictable counter move is going to be, you should wait and see just how people live their lives after this apparent seizure and after these apparent hearsay stories, and then make a careful judgment about whether they were genuinely, veridical events. I think that smuggling in the part of the story where you know that you're not guilty certainly helps Matt's rhetorical point in that instance just a bit.
Well played all around. This one is for you, Matt, first. The question is, I'm curious if the debate on whether Socrates lived or whether the Holocaust happened would go the same way. All of the potential problems to historical credibility or validity can be raised towards those as well. We're less than 100 years from Auschwitz and 2000 from Socrates, but does the passage of time increase the unlikeliness of that?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if I understand the analogy. If Socrates had claimed, or if it was claimed of Socrates that he had been resurrected from the dead or healed people, I think that the argument would go exactly the same way. And I think that the evidence we have about Socrates' life is probably worse. Probably just as fragmentary. So it's readily acknowledged by folks who do study of Socrates' life is that, look, this is all written down by Plato, and you can see Plato writing here, and we don't know that much about him directly, so it's a good problem, it's a good question. Holocaust I don't see as being even on the same sort of level at any levels as one of these questions, the existence of the Holocaust, or whether it happened. I mean, given the evidence we've got. But maybe the quick way to put it is that, recall my point that people, whether we're talking about historical sources or contemporary sources, people we should assign different reliabilities to them depending on what sorts of things they're claiming, right? And what sorts of other corroborating evidence we have. So if people had claimed that there were magical supernatural events in Auschwitz, I think we would be justifiably skeptical. But given the other information we have about the Holocaust and, film footage and bodies and the like, we know. You have a similar problem there. And I'm trying to be consistent with my standards of historical evidence. Good question.
Also, any follow-up to that question?
Yeah. If I have just maybe a minute to say a bit about that, I think Matt handled that question really well, but I think that the original question actually brings out a point that doubting something or denying that it happened is also a serious intellectual position, and it has certain kinds of responsibilities associated with it. And I'm not saying that the Holocaust deniers are in the same boat as the resurrection deniers, but I do want to just point out that just as there are responsibilities associated with doubt in one case, there are responsibilities associated with doubt in the other. Finally, I do think that a point he just made illustrates one of the differences between us tonight. I don't know if Matt would believe in a would believe in a miracle story, even if it was told by somebody with first-hand experience of the miracle and, say, a PhD in philosophy who's written a number of different books in philosophy. I don't know if that would qualify as being careful enough or educated enough, or if he would, on principle, take a reluctant stand on that as well.
Follow-up to that, follow-up.
I guess it's a bit on the case, but I don't want to be, I don't think I'm as skeptical as Hume, and I certainly don't want to deny their possibility a priori. I want to be prepared to accept that some evidence could convince me. Somebody have a lot of explaining to do, but I don't want to rule it out. We should rule it out a priori. That'd just be a mistake. It'd be stupid to say that, and actually I want to concede a point that to Russell too, that you will find out there in the so-called skeptical literature about the resurrection, you'll find a lot of people defending with a great deal of vigor particular alternative accounts of what really happened. And I'm taking them to task too. Because as I understand it, as I understand sort of the milestones, the basic features of this information as it's gotten to us, you can no more defend really soundly defend on the basis of the information we've got, one of these alternative accounts with real confidence than you can the resurrection case. My basic point here is that the information we have is very sketchy, very limited, and it's highly unreliable.